Murderous Minds, The Real Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho and Buffalo Bill, Ed Gein by Top Fives. It's giving us one to watch.
The names Norman Bates, Buffalo Bill, and Leatherface are all seen as psychotic characters in some of the most horrific horror movies of all time. All despicable human beings that commit monstrous acts against their fellow humans. Surely these characters could never exist in real life. Well, that is where you're wrong. All of these characters, and many others, were inspired by the real-life serial killer, Edward Theodore Gein. And although none of them are directly based on his character, they all exhibit parts of Gein's nature and personality, and the shocking way he committed his murders.
Oh, so you hear that? So what he said, pretty much said there, was the character which is in the films isn't 100% based on Ed Gein, but bits of him is added into the film, if you get what I mean, because what he done. So I don't even know what he's done personally, but yeah, this is, it must be crazy because I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, bro. He starts sewing his face to other people, people's faces to himself, and that. Like, he's a crazy guy. Damn, that's crazy, man.
Let's take a step into the mind of the real American psycho, from his birth to his death, to try and understand what drove a seemingly timid little local man to commit some of the most gruesome crimes ever reported.
Oh, I'm liking this entrance still. Not bad, not bad. So Murderous Minds, let's go. Ed Gein.
The roots of Gein's murderous mind can be traced back to his parents. His father George had a rough life, having been orphaned at the age of 3, after his mother, father, and older sister were swept to their deaths in a flash flood.
Oh, that's peak.
George was brought up by his maternal grandparents and grew up with low self-esteem, becoming heavily dependent on alcohol as he drifted through life.
Guys, have you noticed that most murderers, like from back in the day, always had alcohol like problems? They always had some sort of problem, and sometimes it even involved alcohol. Like, look at I forgot his name. I'll think of it. But yeah, literally every single one of them all involves alcohol, and it's crazy. They just go over the edge.
However, things changed for him when he met Ed's mother, Augusta, a fierce, stocky woman who was fanatically religious and obsessively outraged by the loose morality of the world she lived in. The unlikely pairing married on December the 4th, 1899. Their marriage was far from perfect, with Augusta dominating the weak and unreliable George, and it wasn't long before his life became a misery. This resulted in his reliance on alcohol, which often ended in violence between the pair. But despite this loveless union, Augusta gave birth to their first child on January the 17th, 1902, a boy they named Henry, who Augusta did not bond with.
So that's not Ed
Because
Gein.
of her detachment from Henry, Augusta longed for another child, in the hope it would be a girl.
Okay.
When she fell pregnant again, she prayed every night that the Lord would bless her with such. However, this was not to be. On October the 27th, 1906, in Lacoste County, Wisconsin, Edward Theodore Gein was brought into the
Oh, damn.
Augusta was aghast and felt betrayed by the Lord.
Yeah, so many
But
freckles on
later
his face when he was a
decided
kid.
to embrace the child, and in her own words, vowed that he would not grow up like the usual lustful, foul-mouthed males who used a woman for their own perverted pleasure.
So he wanted to be
that Ed would be
she wanted him to be like a gentleman.
In Ed's early life, his parents owned a local grocery store, which they later sold and briefly moved to a small dairy farm near Camp Douglas, before making the permanent move to a farm in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. Augusta kept the household pristine, and the extreme remoteness of the farm meant she could keep herself and her sons away from what she described as the scandalous, low moral standards of the Plainfield townsfolk. As a Lutheran, she took it upon herself to take care of her son's religious and moral training. The two boys only left the farm to go to school. The rest of the time, they were kept isolated from other children. Neither of them fitted in,
So why is
and
the
any
parents
attempt to make
keeping them away
friends
from other
was soon
children?
rejected to by Augusta,
What
who
was the
feared
reasoning
that
behind
they
that?
could associate with common people. Ed had a miserable time at school. He was often made fun of due to his droopy eye, lopsided grin, and effeminate manner.
That
and he
happens,
quickly
bro. It
became
happens
an
still
easy
today.
target for bullies. His home life was equally miserable, with his father regularly beating him in drunken rages, and his mother continually ranting about morality. To add to this, the farm was failing, and Ed was retreating more and more into his own private fantasy world.
Okay.
As adults, the two brothers took odd jobs around the town and worked on the farm. They were both hard-working, reliable, and trustworthy individuals, and the pair were generally well liked. By this point, their father's acute alcoholism was taking its toll, and by 1937 he was a broken man, unable to care for himself, and became entirely reliant on his wife and children, who detested him.
Damn.
It would be a further 3 years before George was released from his miseries, when on April 1st, 1940, he succumbed to heart failure. His loss was not apparently mourned by his wife and sons. In fact, they were relieved they didn't have to look after him anymore. At the time of their father's death, the Second World War was well underway, although neither of the brothers were involved. Henry was too old, and Ed's droopy eye meant he did not pass the physical exam.
So he actually tried going to the war as well. That could
Despite
actually...
this, the brothers started
That could have
to get
helped
more and more
things, you know.
work outside of the farm, and Henry in particular had a good reputation for being a grafter. Ed even babysat for local families, and the children loved his company. The two generally had a good relationship, although there was animosity between them regarding how close Ed was to their mother, and on several occasions, Henry questioned the hold she had over him, and was concerned they were too close. These remarks shocked Ed, as he couldn't believe that his brother did not share his view that their mother was a perfect human being who he regarded as a saint on earth. The criticism of their mother affected Ed and his
That's
opinion
literally
of his
only
brother.
because she kept
It
him
was not long after this realization
neglected
that on
and
May the
away
16th,
from everyone,
1944,
pretty much. Like, if
Henry
you're gonna
found
keep
suddenly
if you're gonna
and
keep one
unexpected
person away from
at the
every
age of
person in the
24.
village, they're gonna think that you're like
The
a
story
god, if you get
goes
what I mean.
that Henry and Ed
Because
had
you're
been fighting
that's
the
the
blaze
you're
on
the only
Marshall
person they're
near
seeing
their
every
farm.
single day.
There was a bit of dispute about how the blaze started, with some claiming it was accidental, and others saying that Gein started it to burn off some dry grass. Although, after Henry's death, Ed declared it was his brother who started the blaze. Ed claimed that a gust of wind blew the fire to out-of-control proportions, and as the two brothers tried to
Seemed
extinguish
like
the
Ed
flames,
knew a
Henry
lot
went
about
missing.
it.
Ed went for help, and a search party was sent out. However, inexplicably, as soon as they arrived, Ed led the searchers straight to his brother's corpse, as if he knew exactly where he lay dead.
Yeah, that's
Henry was
that's
found lying face
weird,
down
man.
and stretched out, with no apparent signs of burns. But what was observed was some strange bruising to his head. Despite this, the official cause of death was asphyxiation due to being overcome by smoke, falling and then hitting his head. Although it seems obvious today, at the time no foul play was suspected, and it was only years later that it was realised that Henry may well have been Ed's first victim. Similarly to the passing of his father, there was no outpouring of grief from Ed or Augusta, and it meant that Ed finally had his beloved mother all to himself. Ed adored her. She was the backbone of his life, and had always kept everything going, both inside and outside the family farm.
I feel
To
that.
Ed, she was
I feel that.
invincible, so when she suddenly became unwell, it came as a huge shock to Ed. He rushed her to hospital in his pickup truck, and it was confirmed she had suffered a massive stroke. Ed stayed at her bedside in the hospital for hours in the hope she would recover. Eventually she was discharged, but she was not the same formidable strength she used to be.
Oh no.
And Ed had to give her around-the-clock care, catering to her every need. It's thought that seeing his mother in this helpless state gave him a strange sense of exhilaration, thinking it was a chance to prove to her that he was a dutiful son, and perhaps for her to show him some affection. However, this was not the case.
No,
Because,
100%.
although
It's never
Augusta
not.
did make a reasonable recovery, she did not show the son who devoted on her 1 ounce of appreciation for the care
Oh, that's
he had
peak,
given her.
man.
Thanks to Ed's care, his now healthy mother was back on the warpath, and in the winter of 1945, she accompanied her son to a nearby farm to pick up some straw. As they drove into the yard, the farmer and his wife were having a furious argument after he beat a puppy to death.
Oh, damn.
The sight of the man's wife, who Augusta believed was a harlot, upset her so much that less than a week later, she suffered another catastrophic stroke. This time, she did not survive, and on the 29th of December 1945, at the age of 67, Augusta was dead, and Ed was all alone.
Oh, no. This is where it actually
At her
goes
funeral,
completely
he cried
south, innit?
uncontrollably and was totally unable to control his grief. He had lost the only thing in life that he loved. Ed would spend the rest of his life trying to replicate his mother in the most horrific ways imaginable.
Yeah.
After her death, those living in the tight-knit community of Plainfield could see little change in Ed, apart from him looking slightly more rough than usual. He was still the polite, slightly awkward, but helpful chap they had always known. Few could realise what madness was rattling around in his brain. Many of the locals felt sorry for Ed, living his solitary bachelor life in the now run-down farm.
It's crazy
Although
of
some
how
of the
what
local
they
women
think
had
of,
said
innit?
they felt a
Like,
little uneasy
what
around him,
does go through
as
their
he had a
brain?
tendency to stare at them with his droopy
That is the
eyelids
question.
and lopsided smirk. He also became the target for many practical jokes with the local farmers he helped out, who considered him the perfect patsy to pick on. Back in his farmhouse, Ed
He
boarded
still
up
gets
rooms
picked on,
used by his
bullied
mother,
when he's like
including the upstairs,
mid-ages.
downstairs parlour, and living room, leaving them untouched for years, while the rest of the house became increasingly squalid. These rooms remained pristine. But as the years passed, Ed retreated more and more from society, spending hours alone, reading his true crime magazines, articles about cannibalism, grave robbing, and sexual mutilation. Only occasionally did he venture out to do the odd job or pick up supplies, although he was known to frequent Mary Hogan's Tavern, a place that was over 7 miles from his home. The reason for this was his fixation on the owner, who bore a striking resemblance to his dead mother. For Ed, his life was painfully empty without Augusta, and his growing resentment of the villagers who teased him was reaching boiling point. One afternoon in May 1947,
So he pretty much only gave in to the bullying. Personally, brother, like you're mid ages, man. You shouldn't be getting bullied. Like, and I don't know, man. I don't know. But he just took it completely south. Like, there's other ways you can deal with it in it, but like, obviously, he just thought, fuck it, why not? But man, that's crazy.
a little girl named Georgia Weckler went missing. She was dropped off by a neighbour near her Wisconsin home and was never seen again. She was just 8 years old, and there was speculation that she had been snatched by a person of deviant mind. Over the next 5 years, there were 4 more unexplained disappearances in Wisconsin, including teenage babysitter Evelyn Hartley, whose heavily blood-stained clothing was found, but her body never was. Then there was
Good
Plainfield
indication that
residents
she is dead.
Victor Travis and Ray Bergs. The two disappeared after leaving Mac's Bar in Plainfield, and their bodies were never recovered. However, it was the disappearance of tavern owner Mary Hogan on the 8th of December 1954 that baffled the police the most. Found on the floor of the tavern was a pool of blood and a spent .32 caliber cartridge,
Okay.
but no sign of Mary. And despite appeals and searches a year on from her disappearance, the police had no clue about what had happened to her. In the years that followed Mary's disappearance, the locals often talked about her, and on the rare occasions that Ed made an appearance in the town, locals recall him making the same joke about her. "She's not missing, she's down at the farm now."
Oh,
Of
bro, he
course, no one
dropped
believed him,
himself
thinking
in
it
it,
was just
man.
oddball Ed making one of his
Why is he
remarks.
snitching on himself?
However,
They always do it,
strange
man.
rumours started circulating the town of Plainfield. They were started by local youngsters who had visited Ed at his now dilapidated farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
They claimed they had seen shrunken heads in his home. Eddie was telling the children that the heads had been sent to him by his cousin who had fought in the Philippines during the war. No one thought too much of it, just thinking it would be typical for him to collect such macabre souvenirs, and it became a running joke with the locals. On the 16th of November 1957, the majority of the male residents
he
of
was out for
Springfield were
years,
participating
man.
in the annual 9-day deer hunting event that Ed did not participate in. With all the locals
Does
out
he
the way,
usually?
Ed ventured into the town and paid a visit to Warden's hardware store that was run by widow Bernice Warden.
Mm-hmm.
Ed knew very well that the heavily built 58-year-old Mrs. Warden would be alone. Initially he bought some antifreeze, but he later returned to the shop on the pretense that he wanted to trade in his rifle.
But he shot her.
It was on this occasion that Ed shot Bernice dead.
Yeah.
When her son Frank came home from the hunt, he discovered the blood-splattered shop and realised something was terribly wrong.
Oh no.
When the police arrived, the deeply distraught Frank immediately told police he's done something to her. When they inquired who had done something, he replied, Eddie Gein.
Straight up.
The revelation caused a rush of activity in Plainfield, as law enforcement officers...
But that was a shot in the dark though, bro. Just to go, yeah, Ed Gein done this. Like,
to locate
you just,
Warden
he just had to know, like, but how?
After calling at Gein's farm, they realised he wasn't there,
So
and
they
made their
paid
way
him
to
a
the Hills
visit.
residence, a place Gein was known to frequent. They were right, Gein had been there after helping to install a car battery. He had stayed for supper and was just about to set off in his car with one of Hill's sons. After asking only a few questions, officers knew they had their man.
Oh damn.
The sheriff in charge of investigating Mrs. Warden's disappearance was Arthur Schley. He was aware that Gein had been apprehended, and so accompanied by Captain Chauffeurster, the pair headed out to Gein's farm to see if they could find anything.
Mm-hmm.
As the officer approached the dingy place that Gein called home, they could never have prepared for what they would discover. As they entered the property, shining their flashlights at the junk-ridden floor, Schley felt something graze him. As he turned around to see what it was, he could see something hanging by its feet. It had been slit down the middle, gutted like an animal, and had no head. But this was no animal. It was the mutilated body of a female. It was Bernice Warden. Schley could hardly believe what he had seen.
Bro, so he mutilated it. Like, he completely took out the whole insides.
He fled the house, fell to his knees in the snow, and was violently sick.
Yeah, I probably would have done the same thing. I'm not gonna lie, that's crazy.
The two men then tentatively re-entered the house. The smell was putrid, the filth was overwhelming, and it was hard to believe any human could live in such squalor. But worse was to come. This was, without doubt, a true house of horrors.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the curious things, like a coffee tin stuffed with blobs of used chewing gum, or the yellowing sets of dentures displayed as ornaments on a shelf. It was far, far worse. There were bowls made...
Wait, hold on. I just heard that a little bit as well. Jesus Christ, what could be worse than that? And he just said there's bowls and I'm seeing a skull. So he was making bowls. Oh, no. Bro, twisted, man. Twisted. Please see God.
From the sawn-off tops of human skulls scattered around the place.
Mm.
These also embellished the bedposts. There were 4 chairs that were covered in strips of human flesh.
Do I need to even say anything more about this one? What the fuck is that? Like, even if you made that, why would you even want to sit on it? It looks so unfucking comfortable.
Flesh, lampshades, waist
Oh my
buttons, and
God.
other artifacts, all honed
Oh
from human
Lord.
skin. A belt made out of female nipples, and a
A belt made out of female nipples. How the hell does one even make that? How do you even get to What? What?
Jade pull made with a woman's lips. Also discovered was a box full of female genitalia. Another containing 4 noses and a Quaker Oats box filled with scraps of human head skin was found. As if this wasn't bad enough, there were also a number of items and clothing fashioned from human body parts. Leggings made from a female's legs.
Leggings made from a female's legs. Why is he even wearing leggings? He couldn't. What? You just didn't want to fancy going out to the shop and buying some jeans?
And several pairs of skin patties. Perhaps the most disturbing item was a waistcoat made from the upper torso of a woman's body.
Oh, my lord.
Worse still was Gein's collection of masks that were actually the peeled off facial skin of 9 women, with their hair still attached, and some with lipstick applied to their lips.
Indicating that he was wearing them.
When he uncovered a paper bag containing a mask honed from the skull of missing tavern owner Mary Hogan.
Oh my god.
The recently butchered Mrs. Warden's heart was also found in a bag by the stove. Her still warm entrails were wrapped in newspaper, and her head was discovered in a feed sack.
Oh my lord.
It was spotted when an officer noticed steam rising from the sack. When the head was retrieved, they noticed each ear had a bent up nail sticking out, with a length of twine connecting them. Gein had obviously intended to hang it up along with all of his other grotesque trophies. In fact, so many body parts were discovered, it was impossible to determine.
Jesus Christ, man. I've got no words. Chat, I've literally got no words. I don't know what to say about this one.
Although it was apparent, there were an array of bones, skin, breasts, genitals, noses, heads and lips belonging to females. All of these horrific bits and pieces were found in the confined area that Eddie lived in within the house. This was namely the kitchen and downstairs bedroom. As you know, the other parts of the house had been boarded up, and it was with some dread that officers removed these boards, fearing what would be behind them. But it wasn't what they were expecting.
What was it?
It was the untouched rooms of Augusta, and everything was in perfect order.
Oh, okay.
All her clothes and possessions had been sealed up and untouched since the day she died. Gein was now in custody and locked up in the jailhouse, close to where Sheriff Schlee and his family lived.
Jesus
Christ,
man.
During questioning,
how is he not confessing that?
Frustrated with Ed, and he lashed out, slamming his head against the jail wall, trying to get a confession out of him. Although this seemed to have the opposite effect on Gein, as he completely clammed up.
Well, he just went
Back
quiet.
in Plainfield, speculation was rife, and the place was overrun with reporters. It wasn't long before the gruesome headlines started to appear. In the following days, Gein confessed to the murder of Bernice Warden.
Fair enough.
He also made an astonishing confession when asked.
At least they got him there. They got him.
Ed admitted,
I would say 4K, but I don't think 4K was a thing back then.
1947, he had been a regular night visitor to cemeteries in the area, and on at least 9 occasions had dug up freshly buried coffins, removed the body, and then reburied the casket. Gein chose his fresh corpses by trawling the obituaries in the local
Jesus Christ, man.
and selecting middle-aged women as his victims. He admitted that some of the women he had known in life. As with the gruesome murder of Mrs. Warden, he claimed the details of his grave robbing were hazy. By now, the press were in a frenzy, with lurid headlines of Gein being a depraved sex-crazed cannibal. There was also speculation that he had been responsible for the disappearance of other Wisconsin residents. In particular, teenager Evelyn Hartley.
Bro, that. Hey, just imagine if there was a bunch of other murderers there, yeah? That was just one easy getaway, right? Ticket right there. Get out of jail ticket. Like, there's probably like 20 bodies on one person. He's like, yeah, Ed Gein done that. Yeah, it must have. Like, everyone who's like. Bro, that's just one complete get out of jail free card right there. Like, yeah, I'll show you the body and everything. Ed Gein done it. Oh, that's crazy, man.
In fact, the press were eager to pin every unsolved disappearance in recent years on Ed, and in scenes that wouldn't happen today, they seemed to be allowed access to Gein's house. This is why so many macabre photographs of the crime scene are available. As more and more details were released, the headlines got more and more grotesque, and many tales of encounters with Ed started to surface. One local spinster even claimed to have been Gein's sweetheart for the past 20 years, a claim that was later retracted.
Okay.
During interrogation, and even a lie detector test, Gein would willingly admit...
But that we all know that's true, though. That's true? That's not true, because he pretty much didn't have no one. Like, he was bullied, and he pretty much didn't have no one in his life. So, yeah.
to some of the more perverse things he did with the body parts, but was less forthcoming when it came to murdering anyone, despite the overwhelming evidence. He also willingly explained his grave robbing, admitting that he would often dig up a body and just take the bits he wanted. This was usually the head and genitals. Then he would rebury the body as if nothing had happened.
Why the genitals?
He also confessed to wearing the human masks and mammary vest that he had created. People were confused as to whether Ed was truly insane or a cunning manipulator of the truth, as throughout his interrogation he remained the meek, mild little man who never swore, was polite and well-mannered, while casually confessing to a string of unparalleled perversions.
God damn.
Eventually Gein admitted to both the murder of Mary Hogan and Bernice Warden, and was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of armed robbery. He was nicknamed the Plainfield Head Collector by the press.
Head collector.
And they also noted that Ed seemed to be enjoying the attention. He was now clean-shaven and smarter than usual, and would smile broadly for the waiting press. Some even speculated that Ed had unburdened his mind.
That's another thing as well, what I noticed about serial killers. They just, once they get caught, like, before they get caught, they have that rush where they think they're invincible, they're not going to get caught, blah blah blah, they can do whatever they want. Then they get caught, and then after they get caught, all the like publicity, like all the fame he gets, or everyone looking at him, if you get what I mean, not even for the right reasons. They're looking at him going like, what a monster, but he's standing there going, people are looking at me, like, if you get what I mean, like, he loves it. They all do.
Mind and was comfortable and happy with himself. Ed's attorney, William Balter, informed him that he would enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. In the aftermath of Gein's confessions, the residents of Plainfield were finding it hard to grasp that Gein was capable of robbing graves, and the thought of their dead mothers, daughters,
It's not
and
hard to
sisters'
rob a
bodies
grave,
being
man.
ravaged
Come on.
in such a perverted way, and then being used as part of Gein's macabre decor, was unthinkable, and they wanted proof. So when Gein readily offered authorities a list of names and dates of the graves he desecrated, it was decided that 2 graves in Plainfield Cemetery would be exhumed. The first was 52-year-old Eleanor Adams, whose grave was right next to Gein's parents, Augusta and George. It was speculated
That makes sense.
that the second was Gein's mother, although this was denied. Digging began to exhume Mrs. Adams' coffin. She had died on August the 29th, 1951, and Gein had admitted exhuming her body shortly after she was buried. As the gravediggers dug down, it was soon apparent that the grave had been disturbed, and when the casket was opened, it was empty, apart from a 12-inch crowbar.
He just left
Next
the
was Mabel
crowbar.
Everson, who died aged 69 on April the 15th, 1951. The gravediggers did not have to dig too far before they came across a scattering of human bones. It was what was left of Mabel Everson. Her casket was empty. Gein had taken what he wanted and left the rest crudely buried just 15 inches below the ground.
He didn't even bury.
These 2 exhumations were enough.
He
to
didn't
verify
even
that
put
Ed
it
was
back in the
telling
coffin
truth about
and
his
bury it.
confession of grave robbing.
That's
another
peak, man.
development,
That's a monster right
The
there.
ever-helpful Ed agreed to show an officer where the rest of the remains of Mary Hogan were. He accompanied the officer back to his farm and directed him to an ash heap where he explained he had cut Mary up and created her on his pot-bellied stove, then put them on the ash heap. Later, another woman's body was discovered in a garbage trench on Gein's land. It was another of his dug-up corpses. When
Oh my
questioned,
God.
Gein denied any sexual activity with the corpses, claiming they smelled too bad. In fact, Gein admitted he had never had a sexual relationship with a man or woman.
He just wanted
And
to do
despite
it.
speculation that he could not have dug the graves alone, he insisted he had. Gein also denied
Well, he had so
any
much time on his
involvement with the
hands.
disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, Georgia Weckler, or the two hunters, although it's widely believed that he was responsible for these as well. Ed was moved to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane, where he underwent vigorous testing and was considered to be physically in good shape, although he frequently complained of headaches and nausea and a constant bad smell of what he described as rotting flesh. However, his mental state was more complex, and he was judged to have had a schizophrenic personality with neurotic manifestations and the inability to look at situations realistically. After extensive testing, it was concluded Ed Gein was indeed insane. This news angered the residents of Plainfield. After all, they had known Ed all his life, and although he was an oddball, they did not consider him insane. They believed he would escape punishment if this was ruled at his trial. Ed remained at Central State Hospital until his insanity hearing on November 21st, 1957. The courtroom was packed, and many remarked that hospital life was suiting Ed, as
Got
gone was
slapped
the
with
gaunt,
the
skinny man.
insane charge, didn't
At the hearing, Gein was declared too insane to stand trial,
he? Yeah.
and he was recommitted to Central State Hospital indefinitely. The town of Plainfield would never be the same again, and press and sightseers flocked to the area.
That's crazy,
catch a
though.
glimpse
To be honest,
of
I wouldn't
Gein's
even know
farm
what to do
and
if I
cemetery.
caught
Gein's
something like that
possessions and
still.
farm were set to go up to auction on March the 30th, 1958, and people flocked to view the items. The proceeds of the sale were to go to meet the lawsuits from Gein's victims' families against his estate. However, on March the 20th, Gein's farm was set ablaze and burned to the ground.
For good.
Although arson was suspected, it was never proven and never properly investigated.
No,
When
they
Ed
probably
was told of the
wouldn't.
fire,
Like, they all
simply
knew they
said,
needed to go.
just as well. The auction of his vehicles and other possessions, including his car, still went ahead, and in a ghoulish money-making bid, it was purchased by sideshow exhibitor Bunny Gibson. Bunny went on to turn the car into a macabre exhibition, charging 25 cents a go. On its first show, over 2,000 people decided to take a look. The total proceeds raised by Sally,
Bro, they
what
all
was left
sold
of
the
Gein's
rest.
possessions,
Yeah.
was $5,375.
God damn, that's a lot of money in that time.
$300 was put aside for Gein's funeral, and the rest went to the lawsuits. With Ed safely locked away, he became a local legend, and was the subject of many jokes and scary stories. The children had their very own real-life boogeyman. However, what brought the name of Ed Gein well and truly into the public eye was in 1960. Alfred Hitchcock released the original slasher film Psycho, a movie that was inspired by a novel by Robert Bloch that was based on the heinous crimes of Ed Gein and his obsession with his mother. In the same year, men working near Gein's farm noticed that dogs were digging out a patch of land. After they went to investigate, they dug up a pile of human bones.
I say finding
including
even more
ribs,
towards the
arms,
like
legs, and a
later on.
pelvis. These were added to Gein's other pile of bones that was still at the crime lab. These
Bro.
remains were quietly reburied in 1962. Meanwhile, Gein had adapted well to his new life in Central State Hospital. He had spent days reading and doing odd jobs. Considered a model patient, Gein was one of the few at the hospital that did not require drugs to keep his madness under control. He had also become a bit of a celebrity with journalists, magazine writers, and sociologists, clamoring to get an interview with him. Unbelievably, he even received fan mail and had women requesting locks of his hair. However, authorities denied all requests, and during his time in confinement, Ed did not receive a single visitor. Hence, there are no public interviews. However, news of Gein's comfortable life angered Plainfield residents, and led to even more claims that Gein was not crazy after all, and that he should be tried in a court of law for his heinous crimes. In 1968, psychiatrists deemed that Gein had recovered enough to stand trial.
Okay, so
January
they're trying to say that he's not insane
Gein
no
appeared in
more.
public for the first time in 10 years, when he attended preliminary proceedings
Bro, he's old,
leading up to his
man.
trial date.
Bro, he
His appearance
changed.
came as a shock, He was now a clean-shaven, smart, healthy-looking man, who was a far cry from the scruffy, gaunt man previously seen in public. The trial was set for November and lasted just a week, in which several witnesses gave evidence, and Gein himself took the stand. When questioned, he maintained that Mrs. Warden was shot by accident, and what happened next he can't remember, as the sight of blood caused him to black out, and everything was hazy. He also said he couldn't remember butchering Mrs. Warden's body and hanging it on a hook. Ed was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Mrs. Warden, however, was now declared insane at the time of the killing, so was deemed not guilty by reason of insanity.
Damn.
Meanwhile, he was convicted and acquitted on the same day and sent back to Central State Hospital for another undefined period. Before Gein was taken back to the hospital, the press were granted their interview with Ed. To many, it was incomprehensible that this shy, polite man could be capable of the atrocities he committed.
Well, you know,
When
it
asked how
just
he
shows you,
felt,
innit?
he replied
Everyone's
he was
like,
relieved and looking forward to going back to hospital,
it's the brain what
saying
does you,
they
bro.
treat you pretty well there. He also laid the blame for his actions on the place he lived.
It's just the
And
place
if the
he
locals
needed,
had been
really.
friendlier to him, he wouldn't have acted the way he did. It was thought that this was the end of one of the most heinous crimes in history, but they were wrong. In a shock move in 1974, Gein filed a petition to be freed, claiming he had now fully recovered and that there was no reason for him to be in hospital. Ed Gein wanted out. On June 27, 1974, he attended a hearing in a bid to be released back into society. As he laughed and joked with reporters on his way to court, to the outside world, Gein did in fact appear to be normal. But chillingly, experts deemed that beneath the calm, polite exterior,
He was
there
normal
was
with the other
still
one.
a seething madman lying within.
Yeah.
And Gein was still deemed to be a
It
threat
just
to
takes
society.
anything to trigger him back off.
His bid for freedom had failed, and he was returned to Central State to resume his life. He stayed there until 1978, when he was moved to Mendota Mental Health Institute.
Oh, they had to
By
transfer
this
him?
time, he was 72, and his health was failing. He lived another 6 years before finally succumbing to senility, cancer, and ultimately respiratory failure. Ed Gein died on July the 26th, 1984, at the age of 77. Gein's death left a lot of unresolved mysteries. It was never established exactly how many women, and possibly men, fell victim to him. But there was almost certainly more than the two he confessed to. Another untalked about death was also attributed to Gein. Sheriff Art Schley, who died of heart failure at the age of 43. It was said he was so traumatized by what he had seen in
Yeah,
Ed's
it's where
home,
I would as
and the
well,
stress
to be
of
honest.
interviewing him had led to his early demise.
Damn.
Many still believe Gein was also responsible for the disappearance of those two girls and the hunters. Edward Theodore Gein, a man who single-handedly caused terror to a small town in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
A man who is the
caused
baseline
mayhem,
for
I'll
some
tell
of
you
the
that.
most terrifying horror movie characters we see today, was buried in Plainfield Cemetery, the scene of his grotesque grave robbing. Laying beside him is perhaps the woman responsible for moulding Ed into what he became. He was finally reunited with his beloved mother.
I don't want to hear none of that sob story. Like, he's done wrong. He doesn't get that little, oh, but he's in freedom now. Nah, he doesn't get none of that. W video though, top fives, W vid. Hopefully this video is loud enough for everyone. I do apologize for the other video. But yeah, I'll catch you in a bit.